So my wonderful publisher, Ruth Lepson, suggests that I read the last poem in his latest book, which is Clark Coolidge's book. Pound for pound, the mice ate my cantos. Okay, Mel, very funny.
Nice.
Yeah.
Joker. So wait, I can sit there, I'll put them down. You ready?
I gave Ed one.
Everybody got
You
what
have
they
one?
need?
Or
And
do you
there's,
mail it?
if you need, there's food, wine, soda water, bread, cheese, butter, all sorts of bad things for you over here. Please help yourselves so everybody's comfortable and happy and nobody needs anything. Welcome. Money till's back there. If you didn't make it, please get it in there. All the money goes to the alleged poet. I've been planning this for quite a while with Ruth. There was a reading about a year ago, and you are rolling, Mr. Pinto Franco? Yes?
I am rolling,
Very
yes.
good. I was planning this for a year. We were at the library there at Harvard with dear Christina Davis, and Ruth gave, what, about a 15-minute long reading from the new book, and that was just breathtaking. And I remember sitting there and writing in my notebook, Ruth, and solo, question mark, and because I was already at that time starting to try to figure out who I was going to pair together and how to bring things in. I wanted a mixture of, you know, really established people and people from word of mouth, and then younger poets that would be brought up as well and sifted through. And but Ruth emerged in my ear at that reading as she had never before, and I think with the new pressed wafer book, the reaction that you got from that was, it said the same thing. It was one of those small books that you pick up and work your way through, and you just nod all the way through the thing. And Ruth is, let me back up, there was a show that Christopher Wagstaff, who is the head of the Duncan Estate and Archive and Justice Safe and so on, put together called An Opening of the Field, which toured around a little bit, and I went down to New York to see it. And I went there because it featured the work of Jess and Robert Duncan, who are personal heroes to me. But what was there was this huge collection of people, probably around 60 people, of which probably maybe 5 to 8 of them were, you know, famous, well-known people like Michael McClure or John Wieners. But there was this host of people that I had maybe heard of or kind of heard of or I never heard of at all. And all of whom had had entire careers, were still having entire careers, working away. Many of them, you know, working in small jobs, teaching here and there, doing this and that. But nobody, you know, who was this, you know, international character or figure, but who were all producing this magnificent work. And Joe Torre used to say all the time, you know, I'm just doing my work, and that sort of became our mantra in good times and bad times. You know, are you doing your work? And that's what Ruth has been doing, and it stretches back. I mean, in my heart, Ruth, it goes all the way back. You spent time at Stony Brook, which when my head first poked out of my little, you know, hovel in California, Stony Brook was this place I kept hearing about. Stuff was happening, you know. And what was happening at Stony Brook is that there were people there that were bringing in the poets, especially Black Mountain poets, key of which, what I assume had been, that's where you met Robert Creeley, yes, yeah.
Anthony Sleverton.
And Robert, and Robert Duncan, and so on, and a host of other people. And so she roots back that far, and into the poetry that I really dearly love, but also ranging out of that into all sorts of other different spaces. You know, your first book was Alice James, which is a women's collective that was here in Boston that, you know, published a lot of people and did a whole lot of work with not a lot of funding. There was, before I knew you, I was going to events at Oxfam that you were involved in. I find this out now. And we come down to, you know, the last, you know, few years when we have been friends and colleagues, and the Pressed Wafer book, which is a small jewel of a book. And so it's with intense pleasure that I get to say welcome, and for your first reading. We missed you at word of mouth somehow. I don't know how, but that happens. And so it's a delight to have you here and to be able to hear you read. Please welcome Ruth Lepson.
Yeah, well, as if we should just have a party, because there are people here from disparate parts of my life, which rarely happens at a poetry reading. But actually, I'm really gratified that Michael invited me to give a solo reading, which I don't often get to do, especially because I'm in the process of putting together a new and selected poems at somebody's suggestion. And so this really gave me the opportunity to select the selected, really winnow it down. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna read from each book and then some new poems. And feel free to comment afterwards as I begin this process of putting the manuscript together. But actually, I thought I would start with a recent one, because that's the only long one, and your concentration is probably better now than it will be later. And so this is, does everybody have the copy of the painting that I sent around? So this is a painting that was at the ICA show last winter of Cy Twombly, painted by Fielding Dawson. And the ICA asked a number of us to pick a piece in the show and respond to it, and this is the one that I picked. And it's quite large, and I was really taken with it, and I went back there many times to write, and it got longer and longer, so I thought you could just look at it if you choose or not while I read. Your chair looks kind of wobbly, Cy Twombly. I think you're an anomaly. You're practically sliding off the chair, the windows broken by lines in a grid. It's time to stand, but sit for another minute. Give us your specifics. Wait, you don't care what you get across or to whom. Your large hands rest beside each other whitely, parallel like piano keys. Your shirt's white, the window behind you is kinda sketchy in 1951. Loose, yet precise, a small face full of interest, unstingy and grungy. A black button on a worn blue jacket. You might jump up and draw squiggles since your body's both curvy and angular. A bit of white sock, usual blue jeans, a blue jacket, bits of brown butcher paper showing through. Your collar's turned up, your hair's a bit of Tweedledee and Tweedledum. The wood floor is what you were born for. That might be a watch on your left wrist, your shoelaces and the stripes of your collar. You were about little things like that, employing house paint, colored pencil, and string, among other things. Your acrylics are bright. What did you do at night, I wonder? You give us just a smidgen of what's in that head of yours. Fielding Dawson, lifelong socialist, socialized with you. No separation between the art and the doing, the art and the life. Unnoticed, you were happy. You broke things down to build them up again. Cy means baby in Greek, master in English, which is what you speak. The British family Twombly had a coat of arms, which you may have found alarming. A hands-on man, plain so you could put it all in the work. Triangles all around. Your face, your collar, your crotch, your right leg forming an acute angle with the chair. Things one might not notice. Your sagging belt, the pocket on your jacket. Legs apart, feet turned slightly outward, the way a man's supposed to sit. Eyes closed or just looking down. The lines of the floor drive the painting forward, thrusting you towards us, colorful, cartoony one. Your shoes are shaped and colored violins. Purple and green bits, far away, barely seen, make the blue less flat. The painting works against the flat canvas, though it's semi-abstract. It's an impression and makes an impression of Cy Twombly. Will you have coffee with me? No? You want to get back to your studio? Stand up, walk away, the day awaits. Dawson shows the colors of nature for you. You're off in your head to a Greek isle, a Sumerian temple, a group of flowers. Part of progressive art, you said, is the complete expression of one's personality. You drew in the dark to develop your line, a wobbly line, a kid's kind. I saw you as a baseball player before I knew your father named you after Cy Young and was himself a Chicago Cubs pitcher. You married a baroness, called your son Cy, Grew up in Virginia, hopped over to Rome, in between moved twice a year. Your sculptures as talismans to guard you on your way. Edwin Parker Cy Twombly Jr., hey, you influenced Basquiat, Kiefer, Clemente, and Schnabel? Very cool. Keats and Mallarmé appear in your work, Rilke and Virgil as well. Places in your huge canvases for them all. Influenced by Giotto, you painted a blue sky on a ceiling in the Louvre, with sun and planets perhaps, painted over with names of Greek sculptors. Dawson painted you with 2/3 blue wall behind you, 1/3 yellow floor. It's right proportionately. For your blackboard paintings, you, quote, sat on the shoulders of a friend who shuttled back and forth along the length of the canvas, thus allowing the artist to create his fluid, continuous lines. Work as a cartographer for the Army influenced what? Your scripts and pictography? Amazingly, Charles Olson worked in Washington too. Cambodian-French artist Rindy Sam was arrested after kissing one panel of your triptych, Phaedrus, which she smudged with red lipstick. At her trial, she defended her gesture. J'ai fait juste un bijou. C'est un geste d'amour. Quand je l'embarrasse, je n'ai pas réfléchi. It was just a kiss, a loving gesture. I kissed it without thinking. I thought the artist would understand. It was an artistic act provoked by the power of art. Ms. Sam was fined and compelled to take a citizenship class. A French woman stripped in front of your Orpheus's trip to the underworld, saying, that painting makes me want to run naked. You were delighted. Who else, you asked, could have that effect? I might add, especially in Houston, Texas. Okay. So now, back to the first book, which is called Dreaming in Color, and they're all for sale, so if you're so inclined, please feel free to buy several. And I chose this one in part because Michael's great teacher was Robert Duncan, and it begins from a line from his famous poem, Often I am permitted to return to a meadow. Fields. There's the meadow of the bed. When there's a timelessness about it, it's real. When there's not. There's the field of dreams, which only seems to have time, which is. There's the field of the poem. When all my other meadows are, I'm permitted to enter. Of course there's no time. Then the poem moves through the others, defining its own limits. The fields crisscross, mingle. Occasionally the meadow of the poem enters the meadow of the dream. Letters 20 feet tall stand on the mountain calling me. I climb them. I am the letter E, red and black. I fall forward, pedaling a bicycle all over the hills. A description. Orange popsicles, and the women and men are swimming, as long as there's a sun, as long as the sun is strong, as a long thing the sun is. The towels are flat and ripple, bodies are heated up, the skin is changing, the sand, the trash cans are red, everywhere I turn is sun, the men and women are clean, the ocean is salt, ocean translucent and olive, not watching the men and women, the worshippers of the sun. As long as the sun is shining, the sand is clean, is moving. As long as the sun, as long as the shadows, a sand, an afterglow of sun. Collage. In a corner of Boston, a group of buildings, above another group of buildings, across the street, in the distance, pastel green and blue. Under the full moon, they reminded me of San Francisco, which reminded me of you. Maybe they still are, and do. I looked around, no one was watching. There was the trolley. I put the moon in a box and got on it. So I was talking to Fanny Howe about the reading. She said, don't read political poems. Everybody wants to escape from them right now, but I am anyway. So I don't usually read political poems, and they're not specifically that. Anyway, this is a very old one, and it sounds, it's still apt, unfortunately. It's about the Cultural Revolution in China, and I remember the times when you would see Life magazine and you would see all these bodies floating down the river, and that's what brought this about years later. Toy boat, toy boat, toy boat, toy boat. That which we know we find most difficult to pronounce. A machine gun chops impressively. The quiet wars of China continue. Bodies float downstream, discover their brothers. See the stare of the present in the eyes of these white ducks, watching the toy boat, watching. And I've hardly ever read this one, but I don't know, Jim Dunn said I should read it, so I listen to what other people tell me. It's called Carmela, and it comes from a time when I volunteered at Boston State Mental Hospital, and Carmela's the person that I used to visit. And she was schizophrenic, and most of the time she was catatonic. This isn't another letter, Carmela. I know I haven't kept in touch. You were rock-ribbed, pitiful, a pile of purple bones rattle, who, sinewy, acute, in unknowable pain, cheekbones a foot long. I'm going to the movies tonight. You're rattling in the main room of the ward after 20-odd years. Alyosha, what do you mean by happiness? Who? Your sister every Christmas dragged you to her grave. You killed our mother, you whore. You don't speak for years at a time. Who? Laura came to see you months after I heard you heard from Ruth. Who at Ruth? And you rattle on. That's a good sign she recognized your name. Who, playing cards for months, then silent except for occasional curses. Can't do that to me. Who can't, Carmela? They gave you black eyes when you wouldn't shower. When you would shower, they laughed at your body. Who? It does no good to remember you. I didn't understand. Years later, someone said, you were wrong to expect her to care about you. Who, on the way home from the hospital, 3 of us in the back seat of the station wagon, doing hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Alyosha, what do you mean by happiness? She nicked her wrist with chiclet, chewed it, blood and all, saying that's what my breath smells like in the morning anyway. And this one I'm reading for Michael because Michael also knows a great deal about Pessoa. In fact, was recently on a Pessoa panel, the great Portuguese poet. And it begins with 2 stanzas from a poem by Pessoa. To me, it speaks of a lot of other things, memories and longings and things that never were. You never heard the wind pass by. The wind speaks of the wind only. What you heard from it was a lie, and the lie's in you. A shadow. Today, January was so warm. We lay side by side without touching, drifting on pine needles, surrounded by melting snow. Neither looked at the other, but at the sky, at the trees' weavings. We heard snow drip noisily from branches, smelled the clarity of weather. I would always lie under the pine trees. I heard your body turn toward mine. That wasn't it. Unconsciously, mine moved toward yours. I saw your eyes what I wanted to avoid. I saw my mind as a city dying and something else was being born. I was afraid I'd given birth to a shadow. I thought the trees told me that. The trees told me nothing. My thoughts were melancholy lies, suspending freedom. Tonight I've returned to my city, and all the things you said you left. I begin to understand another thing, that my mind has to hear the sounds of snow. So that's book one. And book two is Morphology, which is a book of photographs by Rusty Crump, who's a photographer, and photographs by me, and tiny synesthetic moments in dreams, the actual dreams. And one of the purposes of the book is to show some relationship between the waking life and the sleeping life. And we wanted to have it published in color, but the publisher didn't have the money, so we had it in black and white, which Rusty was not at all happy about, to say the least, but I didn't mind. It gave a very different feel, but it's a feel that kind of, it has the darkness of dreams in it. So anyway, these are all moments from dreams, and they're prose poems. I'm looking at a page of stickers of pineapples, cherries, grapes, chestnuts. After a day pauses, I peel one off. An amber scroll, a twill drape, and an aging man are talking to each other. It's a sitcom. I'm the star. Everything that happens, good or bad, is funny. I hear the laugh track. I'm laughing too. I'm playing chess with Elvis. I dream I live in a hotel. What happens there, who can tell? And this is for the jazz musician Steve Lacy. I'm looking at the days of the week, each one a room without a ceiling. The day of Steve Lacy is filled with tropical plants. I think it's a Thursday. Florida after a huge storm. Usually the seagulls have tiny green islands to live on, but now the islands are under several hundred feet of water. I can see them. A little girl is handing out pieces of paper with brown print on them, asking people to save the environment. The people, very tired, are marching in line and get angry at her for wasting paper. This is another one from Michael, who spent 2 years fixing up this place, which we can no longer call a garage. We have to call it a printing room, a salon, a library, a community. May the gods bless you.
Thank you. My neighbors call it the man cave, so that's Are you gonna put a TV up?
They want to come over and hang, huh? Okay, because you love Robert Duncan. At a poetry conference, Robert Creeley is talking to me. Remember, Bob, I asked, how Robert Duncan would always bring someone with him to counterbalance himself? If he was sad, he'd bring along someone who was happy? Well, I wouldn't go quite that far, says Creeley kindly. The reception at the end of the conference takes place in a campus building the poets decide is dull, so they turn it on its side and 2 poets make of it a huge amber earring. Well done, we say. Make it more fun, they reply. Jono is curving our words into colors, parts of the neon sweep across the San Francisco night. A red tree and a yellow tree against a very blue sky. My hair's curly yellow, my body plum red from drinking Kier's Royale, my clothes bright blue the way Frank Lloyd Wright put yellow and blue together, as in the stained glass of the sky and the sun. The snow turns musical like the scroll on a player piano, and you and I dance the cha-cha in the street. The telephone poles are lacquered, the traffic lights sort of covered, lime green, gold, and cherry red like little sunsets in my head. You're dreaming softly, and it doesn't really matter that the wind is veering off sideways, the blizzard quieted. The bridge is like some shoulders, the river like the sea. I had no idea that Bill Corbett, who in the past 2 years has become my publisher, would be here today, but I brought this because so many of you know him, and it has him in it, so here we go. A store on a small hill in Nowheresville. It specializes in antiques and clothes and books. I go in to browse. Bill Corbett, one of the owners, is standing around. You used to work here, he asks, incredulous. Yes, I tell him. I sold pre-owned women's clothes. It's symbolic. Someone is asking me about a Babar book while I eat a banana. It's a real knockout, I say. And they are. The brown hills are healing. The green hills are soothing. The charcoal hills and charcoal clouds that half cover the moon draw us in. The gold hills I wish I could lie down on. The night black hills bring death happiness, while the cars in the valley crisscross, fireflies, stars passing so fast they don't acknowledge each other, and the ochre house sits halfway down the valley on its own promontory, content. You close your eyes and the sky falls down. Millions die in the dark. There are always dark places on earth. How then can we call ourselves people? Someone photographs me sleeping in my room. And finally, a profound political one. A cat is running for president. He's sporting a suit and tie, standing behind a mic with his two front paws held high. If I am elected president of the United States, he promises, I will America two things: a dark, warm, safe place for each person, and more fireflies. There you have it. Well, better than what the current administration is promising. And shall I keep going, or you want to take a little break? Keep going? Okay. So this is the third book called I Went Looking for You. These trees, after I've left, these trees, their insistent green humming will shine, and all my emotions will have been just that, mine. Courtyard concert. Music like wind. The flutist teases out from his silver flute the song of a young girl he's loved. Patient cello, it's at its turn for now. The green drums gleam, the chimes a Marquesas necklace. Gray curtains of the stage ruffles in the breezes. What will I tell you? City, wood, and stone. Silent sculptures of muscular men. I'll write you a letter and tell you about tonight, though if I feel you through my body, am I away from you? There's a frieze of a donkey on a cornerstone. A cat trots by. You have a cat. What am I? Palazzo Pitti, the deepening sky, the star or two that doesn't need a bird to fly to it, the chimes, the boy softly striking the cymbals, keeping time, then breaking it. You tell me a little lie. A rush of keyboard, ocean foam bubbles by. And now 3 poems for Swampscott, although apparently it's pronounced Swampskip, according to Mark Logwood. I've been mispronouncing it all these years, although it's a town I'm very attached to and spent a long time in. Ocean at Bay, Swampscott, skip. Water like mercury, blue ice, glint white, brown, rolls, fizzles over bricks, the car tracks made in gray sand. Rocks the necks of turtles, masts bobbing like pogo sticks. Two layers of shadows, one moving stiffly over the other, like a loom. A Dalmatian chases pigeons and gives up. I go into white wooden stores anytime I want. I love this town. Across the bay, the jagged Boston skyline, like me, definitely there, but so far away it doesn't matter. Swampscott in a warm December. Oh, and there's a reference to a book, Bakshi by Ford Madox Ford, and Bakshi means a boon of some sort. Ocean's a huge brain. Light thoughts, gray thoughts, trillions arriving, veering off, none the truth. I look up from Bakshi by Ford Madox Ford, there running out of the water a decade earlier, my golden retriever. How should I treat my mother? Like a piece of glass, God says silently. And I ask the reason I'm here, the pleasure of space. Like a pancake spreading across a pan, the sea sizzles at its edge. Swampscott hour. Seagulls spread out in a line by the water's edge, a string of lights unraveling. Ducks, dark as darkest rocks, form a circle in the sea. On the drive home, sun huge, its reflection white gold on telephone wires. Something turning into something new. Cool wind, something old. Black birds fly, black stars in a white sky. Now this is a prose poem called For the Dead. Coming back from vacation, I passed a cemetery with a sign that read, "Pray for us." I had thought that if anything, they were praying for us. Now the black hollow notes of Shostakovich, September, and the oval leaves of the locust, matter of fact, push me to work. Maybe in purgatory a woman waits for us to lift the shadow that falls on her, the shadow we can still move in this changeable place. Maybe all we can do for the dead is give up our poses, since after life there is no more silence over a meadow. There are no sparrows whose explosion into the sky sends a ripple through our patient bodies. And this is called the poem of Jay, and it was written after Harold Bloom and David Rosenberg's The Book of Jay, which some of you may be familiar with. I asked A about it. He laughed and said I already knew about it. Still, he didn't seem to realize my problems were with me. I asked B about it, and she was very upset and said my life was hard and her life was hard. I asked C about it, and her answer was very interesting and well put, but I couldn't apply it to me. So I asked D about it, and he spent many years giving me the answer, little by little, but at this rate I'll never get it. I asked E about it, and he made some disparaging remark and wanted to talk about money. I asked F about it. She didn't want to talk about it. I asked G about it, and we had a very intense conversation, after which he disappeared and never came back. I asked H about it, but there was a question of confidence that got in the way, over and over again. So I called I about it, since of all the people I know, he seems to know most about it. But by the time I reached him, I was tired and couldn't sustain the conversation. Finally, I talked to Jay about it, who was dying this year, and who didn't feel very much in his life, and invented a persona more consciously than most of us do. And he said he'd hoped he'd find feeling and learn to love and learn to die. I wished him luck, and he was astonished that I was crying, since we had been out of contact for years, but now all that had angered me seemed petty. Excuse me. October 7th, 1994. This is for Sally Cedric, whose house in Back Bay I lived in. Some of you may even have known her. The shadows of the bicycles are sharp on the yellowing brick path. Yellow mums under the lamplight, golden as the air. The moon is cut in half. The leaves of the locust, now mustard yellow, a sophisticated color. Chastise me like an old lover would. Your thoughts are sophistry, they say. The truth is, Sally died today. Sally's heart is a large heart in the carriage of her body, and horses rush it away. And one for Denise Levertov, whom some of you knew, and then one more after that from this book. And the Denise Levertov one is called Selah, which is a Hebrew word of unknown origin that marks the end of a verse, and it's thought to be a term indicating a pause or a rest. Selah for Denise Levertov. Every day I hear enough to fill a year of nights with wondering. One more day of sun on snow would have pleased you. Your mother at 90 sighed, how tired I am of appreciating the gift of life. Somerville, nothing too neat, a small house in a cul-de-sac half hidden from the street. I hold out my hand to a bird with a smooth peach color. It disappears in the headlights. Is your spirit in the west in personless spaces in gray and green last decade of your life? Green of the street light running liquid down the lane. I turn the Jacob's ladder over, but no picture of you there, only black and granite. Decades before my father's blindness, you wrote about looking at the blind man on the subway. He knows where he is going. It is nowhere. It is filled with presences. He says, I am. Many the girls you mothered, making distinctions, sitting straight, ever the ballerina, intuiting each line break, precision, earnestness. The saints you wrote up with descriptive love. Smoke of noise on the small highway. Tar swirls in the gray street. After the memorial celebration, out past the heavy church door, a large sun floods a soft sky. On the drive home, auto harp and fiddle and a woman's clear tones. For many, you were soprano and alto. Largesse, gap-toothed laugh, her comeliness dissipates, glitters in our tiny dawn. And this one I never read, but because it's political, I'm being perverse. So this is the last from this book. It's called Imagining the Imprisonment of Miss Wu Shu Lien. And I wrote this poem many, many years ago because a friend of mine and I were both active in Amnesty International. And it was going to be International Women's Day, and she wrote to me and she said, could you write a poem for the Amnesty newsletter about one of these three women who were imprisoned? And I chose this woman, wrote a poem. It was in the newsletter, and I kind of forgot all about it. And then years later, I saw a sign on a bulletin board in Waltham that she and Liv Ullman were going to give a talk in Boston. And I said, what? She's out and she's here. And so I called her. She was getting her PhD. She had gotten out of prison, and she was getting her PhD at Harvard. And so I invited her over for dinner. And she's this really diminutive person, you know. And she came with this big box of chocolates that was bigger than her whole body, it seemed. And then later on, she would make these very elaborate Chinese meals for me. And it was fascinating talking to her because she was so free and fearless. She told me that when she was first tortured, the first few weeks she was in prison, she was tortured, and she wanted to die and she hated her captors. But then she was in jail for 7 years, and she got very close to the guards. And I said, well, did you resent them? Did you hate them? And she said, no, I felt sorry for them because they couldn't get better jobs. And I thought, this is a transcendent person, you know. And she would bring these women to town who were from various Asian countries, who were feminists and whose books had been censored in various Asian countries. And I'd get to have dinner with them. And so it was fascinating. But I wrote this poem, you know, years before I knew any of this. And she eventually, you know, they became more liberal in Taiwan, and she went back and she started the first battered hotline for women in all of Asia. And then she ran for vice president, and she became vice president. Can you imagine after being imprisoned for 7 years and then she became the vice president? And she had cancer too, because she had developed cancer in the prison, but she persisted, just nothing would ever stop her. So imagining the imprisonment of Miss Lu Shulian, and I call it imagining because I don't think we can really know. I'm aware that it's just my imagination. People talking in restaurants with absorption and great seriousness about baseball or expanding their business. How we limit ourselves, a trick of reading in the near dark, denying darkness beyond lamp or room. I didn't want to imagine it. I wanted to imagine it. Woman or man, one of the few times when that makes no difference. Vulnerable as cows in their stalls, which are all the world then. But if the person tortured is a woman, I know the curves of a woman. I don't want to imagine them hurt, but I can. What I won't imagine are the rooms, the unchanging months. Quote, Miss Lu Shulian was arrested on December 10, Human Rights Day, in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, after a human rights rally that ended in rioting. She received a master's degree from Harvard. She was one of 2 feminist writers convicted. Her publications include New Feminism, The Past and Future of Taiwan, and the Amendment for Legalizing Abortion. Reportedly, she must read books assigned by the prison authorities and write lengthy favorable reviews of them. She has been forbidden to use the words peace or human rights. Just so, Muriel Rukeyser insisted, no distinction between the political and the personal. Quote, he sees the sharp fear pass verdict upon her, pitching and frothing toward the mechanical white walls. To some, love must be unreal as sunshine in rooms where there's no day, wind, summer. I imagine some still find the stream of love in the body, feel it flow to the prisoner in the next cell, if there is a next cell. Some die from what was done to them. Some are not allowed to die. We have been more savage than most. Often we forget that. Write without pressure, believe in language. Lu Shulian's captors do. For her, we write peace and human rights. That much we are willing to do. So that's that book. And then, now we have, now am I taxing you? Is this, have you gotten to, no, you can still concentrate?
Yes.
Okay. I've lost all sense of how long I'm reading for. How long has it been? About half an hour? Okay. So this is a few poems from the new book. And if you could get the proportions right, the world would look real. The purples close by, the mountain ridges softening the landscape, and in between the wind-blown vineyard, lines of wind-breaking cypress, silver-brown olive trees. Looking long and plainly, you'll imagine there are other mountains over there today. You'll discover a valley or two. Seeing something new, riot and rest, orange blossoms and white, and underground and in the sky, what you can't know or be stopped by. No thought is worth this. Why have ideas of worth when all's equal under the sun? I wish you the bravery of the hummingbird who migrates over the Gulf of Mexico, the cold of the clouds, the warmth of the clouds. Who am I to wish you anything? The way you go is perfect. May you see the diamond city on your way to find time's end. You still making jokes, statements outrageous as electricity and telephone wires. You still love to swim and go from Tribeca to isolation tanks to Belize. The extremes others shirk, you search for. You couldn't cry. I used to think we should cry at the fact of death. Maybe the stoicism of the wind is right. Maybe the lightness of your jokes. And this one is again for Steve Lacy, the jazz musician, when he died. Eased away from the squeeze play, so no more squealing, no more squiggles, so no more squib kicks or brackets or brambles or crawfish. And after dinner, just a squadron squelching squalor, no sputter, squamation, or sprocket. Not a sprinkler or even a sprig, no more gigs. No great spotlight, never more a spree, just a sprag, not some spunky, no more donkey. Just some wheels, not a single springtail or spring head in sight. Just spring fever early at night, nor sprawl, not a spokesman or a spondee left. A split second nor one spireme, not even a spire, nothing splashy, never splendid, not a spinnaker, no brown nor a prism stilled spiccato, no sphinx spellbound or a sphere, no more spells, spats or chaps or spasm, not another carnival, and no more of that great mocha java. The boy in the special crib on wheels is screaming in Whole Foods, and we at the checkout counter stare at his parents. His mother is trying so hard to be cheerful, and how could we blame her for anything, what trials she has. This is like depression when it's bad, and you can't think of anything else, and you wonder how anyone else can concentrate on the subject at hand. After all, the screaming in the background is so preoccupying. So some of you know the poet Lauren Nidecker, and this is she lived in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. Very quiet life. She scrubbed hospital floors most of the time for a living, and she turned out she was writing these very sparse, stripped down poems. So this is a dream that I was her. Dreamt I was Lauren Nidecker, walking home from the hospital. The sky was whitish gray, noticing weed and branch along the way. In church, I wore a pillbox hat, carried a modest purse, saw every bit of life there advance. In the morning, those preoccupations come. News of climate change hardly sinks in, like life after death. It's there, but where? I see his picture, then imagine his laugh, even though he's dead. Turns out he wasn't so nice to his wife. That changes my feeling about him, even now, and my feeling's the same, too. I hate it when people say they're going to do something and don't come through. Am I being rigid? Why say it if you don't mean it? If you mean it and forget, why not say sorry? I'm sorry, I forgot, I couldn't do it, wasn't able, I got busy, I was sitting at the table with friends and not thinking of you and what it was I said I would do. Driving through the streets, driving through the lights that drive the city. The colors that change moment to moment. All those brown oak leaves in the median strip. A few flopping in the wind, flickering pages. And along the river, the pale lights in the high-rises. The red lights sheen in the painted green fence. That is what I mean. Trees' limbs playing against the tinted sky. The kids jogging, the time passing. And two more. This one was actually set to music by this composer, Frank Carlberg, who teaches at New England Conservatory, and his wife sang it, and it was very interesting for me to hear that. I mean, I've performed with musicians before, but usually I read the poetry and the musicians play, and in this case she sang. So now I can never hear it without hearing her voice and the phrasing, the intonation, everything. It's fascinating. It's affected the way I read it. If I wrote the poem in a circle, maybe you wouldn't die, and I could be with you. I wish it were true. And finally, for Robert Creeley, who's interred in Mount Auburn, his ashes are interred in Mount Auburn Cemetery, as many of you know. So, There's Joel Sloman in the back, who was forced to listen to many of these poems and comment on them in preparation for the reading, for which I thank him, because he makes very astute comments. And he and I often go walking in Mount Auburn Cemetery, as I do with other people, and we go visit Creeley and have little conversations with him. Really, Creeley? Were you alive at one time? Who visits your burial site? I do, so do lots of others. Were you merry? Impossible query. Complex as a bee and a flower simultaneously. You had it all, still lingered in sadness sometimes. Only one eye, with it, saw like a salamander. With your existential why, bye-bye, I say it over and over. I ask if you enjoy the English landscape in Mount Auburn Cemetery, where we walk and where they put you on the tour. Even in death, you're on the tour. My. Thank you. Thank you for coming. It's nice to see the faces of so many people I love.
Thank you, Ms. Lepson. Books are for sale. I'm sure Ruth will sign them for you.
I noticed that one was on sale online from a used bookstore for $5,000.
I want to know what the scam is on that. 'cause
I know. I'll give you a break though. And, offer what you like. Bill, what should I sell the most recent one for? Whatever I want.
Whatever you can get, it's all yours. It's your royalty.
I know.
Buy it for the full price,
Yeah.
$47.50.
Thank you all for coming. If you missed the bucket for payment, don't forget, we'll be back probably sometime late in January. We can start to schedule them now and figure out. It's also going to depend on how much snow we get and how much digging to get back here we have to do. But thank you all for coming.
Do you have a mailing list?
Yes, thank
Email
you,
list?
because if you go on Facebook, look up XIT, XIT the Bear, and I can get you on the list there. Also, I didn't say, but this reading, as well as Mr. Barrett's, Mr. Corbett's, are going up online, thanks to my dear child back there, Tomas, who does the videoing for me, and then all the rendering, and puts up with me going, is it done, is it done? And but puts it up on YouTube for us. So
And did I see Isabel come in?
You did.
Is she here?
I'm here.
Isabel. So a round of applause for Michael and Isabel for creating this.